Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are honored to have with us today Her Royal Highness Princess Rym Ali in conversation with author Nima Abu Wardeh for the launch and virtual book talk of The Brilliant Communicator. I'm Hania Salah, Director of Columbia Global Center Amman. Since its establishment in 2009, our center has served as a dynamic hub for academic collaboration, bridging Columbia University's expertise with the unique opportunities and challenges of the Middle East through education, research, and public engagement. At the heart of our work is the exchange of knowledge, connecting ideas, experiences, and expertise to foster meaningful dialogue, practical solutions, and impactful partnerships. This webinar reflects that mission and brings us together this evening. And we are also pleased to partner with the Jordan Media Institute on this event. Communication is a skill we all use every day, whether in sharing ideas, connecting with others, or articulating a vision. Yet mastering it can often be a challenge. At a time when communication is constantly evolving, shaped by digital platforms, cross-cultural interactions, and the demand for immediacy, it has become more critical than ever. Effective communication is no longer just about conveying information, but about inspiring trust, fostering collaboration, and creating impact. The ability to communicate effectively can transform how we lead, build relationships, and achieve our goals. This is why tonight's conversation is so relevant. Communication is both an art and a science. It is what sets leaders apart, helps individuals navigate complexity with confidence, and empowers all of us to create meaningful connections in a rapidly changing world. We are fortunate to have with us Her Royal Highness Princess Rym Ali and Nima Abu Wardeh to share their wealth of experience and insights on this important topic. Her Royal Highness Princess Rym Ali is the founder of the Jordan Media Institute, a non-for-profit organization dedicated to advancing journalism education in the Arab world. Princess Rym has been a driving force behind media and journalism education and has dedicated her time through her leadership roles to promote communication and understanding across cultures. Since 2005, Princess Rym has served on the Board of Commissioners for the Royal Film Commission Jordan and has been the president of the Amman International Film Festival since 2017. Princess Rym is also currently the president of the Anna Lindh Foundation for Intercultural Dialogue. A former journalist, Princess Rym has worked with international organizations, including CNN, the BBC, and Bloomberg TV, reporting on major global events with a focus on international affairs. A graduate of Columbia University School of Journalism, Princess Rym also holds a Master of Philosophy in Political Science from Sciences Po and a master's degree in English Literature from the Sorbonne University. Her achievements have been recognized internationally, including being named a Knight of the Legion of Honor by the French government. We look forward to a dynamic conversation and encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. We will address them in the latter half of this webinar. I would now like to invite Her Royal Highness Princess Rym Ali to lead the discussion. Your Royal Highness, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hania Salah. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for the very kind introduction and thank CUMERC, the Columbia Center in Amman, for supporting this event, this webinar, and for working in cooperation with JMI. And now it's my turn to introduce Nima. Nima Abu Wardeh is also a journalist. She's a keynote speaker. She's a coach with decades of experience on global TV, including 12 years with the BBC and on stages worldwide. And I would like to come back to that a little bit later, because we were once on rival networks, were we not? And she brings first-hand experience combined with reality-based know-how to her work with executives, helping them to become, well, brilliant communicators. Now she wants to share this transformative expertise, be it about personal success or business success, with others, other experts, founders, entrepreneurs, who are all looking at redefining success on their own terms and to turn their vision into reality. So you can find out more on her website. She's done 10,000 interviews, and now she's just written a book by the same name as the website, The Brilliant Communicator. The book just came out on Monday. Now, having shared this short bio with everybody, I do want to say, Nima, welcome, and hurrah, finally, you and I have waited for this moment for some time. We were both, as I said, in rival networks. You were at the BBC, I was at CNN. We even had shows that were sort of competing. I mean, among other things, you did Middle East Business Report, and among other things, I did Inside the Middle East. But now your book is giving us this opportunity to, after 20 years, to actually have a conversation, which we never did 20 years ago. So it's a conversation on a subject that's very dear to our heart, of course. As Hanya pointed out, no matter what we do, no matter what our profession in life, communication is essential. Now, when you're a broadcast journalist, people seem to think that communication comes naturally or easily. I want to say maybe not all forms of communication are created equal. It's very different to gather research and then communicate facts. And it's quite another thing to communicate with the intention of convincing, or again, as Hanya was pointing out, creating an impact. So we'll be looking at questions from the audience for Nima. What I would like to start with is looking at what you have all said about this matter, what emerged in the registration feedback, actually. And I think it looks like there were three main concerns that maybe you can address, Nima. So the first one was the feeling of not being heard when communicating with others. In other words, people say, well, we speak, we communicate, but why are we not heard? Second concern was the panic, the discomfort with the idea of all eyes on you during public speaking. And trust me, it happens to everyone, even broadcast journalists. And third concern was how to ensure that your communication is both memorable and genuine, especially with this media landscape that we're all living in, with AI, with the social media. How do you stand out? How do you not sound like a robot? Maybe we can start with this, Nima.
By the way, they're fantastic. I mean, those three thoughts, those three concerns that came up are brilliant because they actually follow the arc of everything we're going to talk about, everything the book talks about, which is great. So thank you to the people who sent in those questions. Can I take a step back before I first go with the first one, please, which is, I have a question for you. Who gets the money? Who gets the money? The person who is the brilliant communicator or the person with the brilliant idea, product, system, process? We know the answer, right? The answer is it's the person who is the brilliant communicator. They are more likely to get the yes, the opportunity, right? And so my big message to everybody is, don't let that happen. You know, be brilliant at both. Both, you've got a fantastic brain, expertise. You've done all the hard work to become the entrepreneur, to become the whatever it is that you do in life. So now let that expertise, let it pay off for you by becoming brilliant at getting across what you want, need, and do. This is a core message for me about life in general. Let's start with your first point there, which is the idea of, listen to me, you know, I'm not being heard. We've all felt that, right? We could feel it with our teenage child or a colleague at work or the political situation. So what is that about? That actually is, it's the root of that is what 90+% of the people I have interviewed on global TV, on stages, have done. It's the mistake they make. What is it? It is that they start with what's important to them. And that's a route to failure, essentially. If by communication we mean, I want you to get what I'm communicating, what I'm speaking about, how I feel, what I need or want from you. If the purpose of communication is transferring a thought, an idea, and planting it into somebody else's head, then the first thing you need is to get the attention of that person. And the only way we do that is by starting with something that's important to them. And so perspective is key. If it's your perspective, you are not going to communicate. If it's their perspective, their priority, their pain, their problem, they want to know what you're going to say next. Now, then you've got to keep their attention. That's a different conversation, right? but you don't get the chance to communicate if you don't start with something that's important to the other person. By the way, my definition of communication is very specific. It is transmission and receiving. So I can put something out, speak it, write it, draw it, doesn't matter what that form of communication is, but that's not communication. Communication only happens when a specific type of person receives it and processes it and does something as a result. So there is behavior change or an aha moment, something that happens that is changed as a result of that, what we call communication. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Before we go on to the second point, I do want to put something out there also related to your core message. You know, we've also been taught to not really, I mean, a lot of us may have been raised to sort of, you don't brag, you don't sort of put yourself forward because it's not considered, I don't know, something or other. Your work will speak for itself. But here we are now in a world where we, you know, we have to do much more than that. And so it's a bit of a difficult barrier to break, maybe for some of us.
You're absolutely right. Big data tells us that, for example, women, and I was specifically specifying women because if you look at big data, they are more likely to die broke and they are more likely to be disadvantaged. And if you look at the corporate world, the fact is that they are a minute number, single digits, as we progress across the pipeline. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because actually for me, at the core of this is knowing how to communicate what you want and need. That's at the core. If you don't do that, don't expect somebody else to do it for you. And if you're an entrepreneur, you need this because, hey, you're competing with some other product or person or, yeah, so you want that business, you want to be the go-to for your niche. If you're a founder, you want the money, the investment, you know, so there's always something that you need or want. And that's why I say that it boils down to getting a yes that you're after. That really, if you simplify communication, it's getting an actual yes or a metaphorical yes. That's the purpose of it. To your point about putting yourself forward, the bottom line is this. You've got an opportunity. It could be a promotion or it could be a product that you're selling. If you're not in the mix, you know, if you're the world's best kept secret, you're not going to get that opportunity. And when they did research and surveys, I mean, we're talking about, you know, PwC and Bain and Co. and lots of that type of big numbers of research of people in the cohorts. People who don't ask don't get. So it's not just, oh, this is a nice phrase to say, and yeah, we all know that. It's actually backed up by the numbers. So yeah, you need.
So word of mouth doesn't work.
Pardon me?
So word of mouth doesn't work.
Word of mouth can work if you are, well, you see, now this is it, right? If you become what I call the category of one person, so in other words, all right, let's do this is not a brag, it's a fact, because that was the other thing. If it's a fact about you, embrace it. It is a fact, say it in a matter of fact way. So I'm going to do that right now. I've never applied for a job or a role. They have come to me. Why? Because somebody knew that I was the solution to their problem, or somebody knew about me. You see, so that word of mouth does work if you are known for a specific skill or thing that somebody has a problem with. So they can come to you, but only again, if you're known for it and if they can find you. So it really does boil down to what I call becoming the CEO of credible you. You are credible, you're an expert. This is key. I'm not interested in fluff and influencer type stuff. Not my bag, not interested at all. I'm interested in people who are experts, who are credible, and them taking ownership of that. What does that mean? That means, oh, I am this. Great. I do think this. I do know this. This is my experience. This is the product I've created. Whatever that thing is put it out, put yourself out there. I don't mean personal branding. No, personally, that's become a marketing funnel. Not interested in that. I'm interested in the actual value that whatever it is that you know and do has and how you help others. But it's about being very specific and focus on who it is that you want your yes from. You don't have big numbers. It could be 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. You don't need to have the followers and the influencer type mentality. You don't need to be in every platform. That's not the approach I take.
So going back to the 3 points that were raised by, the second one was this: if it is 1,000 people right in front of you, how do you deal with this discomfort, all eyes on you? And actually, I think it can also be metaphoric. It can also be something on social media that maybe you don't want to expose yourself to all these people on social media, or maybe you don't want to expose yourself to an audience. How do you do that? How do you work with that?
I mean, this is my personal take, of course. There are other methods out there. Personally, I like to do what I call build in a deliberate, intentional way. By the way, the book is 3 parts. The first part is called Build. Build, share, elevate are the 3 pillars of the book. And by build, what do I mean? I mean, A, if you're not credible, if you don't have the expertise, you've got nothing to build with. So go and get those skills, get that expertise, become the expert. If you do not know how to share, i.e. communicate, it could be written, word, on camera, whatever that format that is comfortable for you to start with, then you have nothing to build with, because that's your tool to become the go-to person in your niche. And part of that is to your point, which is, wait a minute, what am I building? So you don't want to build something that you hate or that kills you. Meaning, if you don't want to be on social media, don't be on social media. But you do need to figure out the conduit, that link with the right people for you. It could be, for example, that you become somebody who goes on podcasts, for example, and is the expert in your field, and you are always the guest. And by the way, I personally love this approach. I call it borrow while you build. You're borrowing somebody else's audience, but they have to be the right people for you. Okay, so let's park that idea. Bottom line is, if you're not comfortable, well, take a step back. If you don't want to do it, meaning I do not want to be on Instagram, then don't do it. You don't need to be on Instagram, as an example. If you want to be the go-to person and you believe that the best route to that is being on stage and speaking at specific events, then go and get those skills. You have to become uncomfortable to become comfortable doing it. My approach is 3 C's. You want to be credible. I think we've established that. You want to be or get comfortable. And the only way you do this is by figuring out what you need to do and putting in the reps. So actually putting yourself in that situation. And you need to be consistent. So the 3rd C is for consistent. Credible, comfortable, consistent. What do I mean by consistent? It means if you want to be known for a certain thing, then, and there's an opportunity that comes up, you lean into it. I'll give you an example. This is a true thing. Massive construction annual gig. 2 people were approached to be speakers at it. Both of them turned it down. It was just, I mean, I was involved in it, and I know the people involved. And it was a great loss because they really wanted to become known for that thing, that expertise, which is what they were approached for. Think of it from our perspective as journalists. We spend a lot of time researching and finding out the person to fill the knowledge gap. And we approach them and we say, we've got this report, we've got this program. Would you please be a guest? If they turn around and they say no, personally, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't go back and ask them again. They would be on my blacklist because I had a weekly program. I didn't have time to go and start convincing and asking again. So you've got 2 problems. 1, you lose the opportunity that was there. 2, you have a perception problem because the person who asked you is not going to ask you again. And so you have a bigger problem in terms of changing perception. Once somebody thinks something of you, it's really difficult to change it. So to your point about being uncomfortable, 1, be really deliberate. Why are you doing that thing? Does it serve your big success, however you define it? If it doesn't, don't do it. There are so many things that you could be doing. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. 2,
That's a very,
if it's something you want to do, then I would say get the right support, that's really important. And by support, for example, how do you change the way you think so that you don't forget key points? How do you stay calm and centered so that you don't let your nerves, take over and you start speaking really fast or whatever that thing is? So you need to get comfortable by, I believe, being supported. And the third thing is you've got to do it. You've got to step up and put in your reps if it's something that is critical to what you are building for yourself.
Indeed. And it is something that builds over time as well. And for those of us who haven't, not everybody went to a school where you were sort of put in front of all these people to speak and were trained that way. So it's something that sometimes people can struggle with. But I hear your point, and I think it's really important to sort of gradually sort of, as you said, build yourself out of that discomfort or find ways around it, but still be out there communicating. And the third point, how to ensure your communication is both memorable and genuine. Now we're in a crazy media landscape, Nima, and how is your voice heard, and how does your voice stand out? It's really hard to stand out with all this. It's not just noise. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there too. But you need to be remembered for something or noticed somehow.
Yeah, I mean, okay, here's a question for everybody listening, which is amazing. We've got 74 people here. Fantastic. And many more will, I understand, watch the recording. So it's for you as well if you're not here. The question is, when you are looking for an answer, some question you have, for example, you want to know what best, I don't know, t-shirt to buy, supplement to buy, thing for your hobby to buy, whatever that thing is. When you're looking for information online, my question to you is, well, actually, when you're looking for information, what we tend to do is we tend to go online, right? That's a big thing. So when you do that, what happens? We tend to then get dragged into rabbit holes and deep, dark, tunnels of information. Do you find the answer? Do you find the solution you're looking for? My experience is that 9 times out of 10, you don't find the solution. You find that you wasted hours of your life and you've got more information and it's like, oh my goodness, well, what do I do? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because this is an opportunity for people who are, again, credible experts and want to lean into being known for it. Why? And again, this is in the book, by the way. If I remember correctly, I say something like, so this is called information that doesn't inform. All this stuff. It's information that doesn't inform, doesn't serve you. How about you becoming the solution? How about you becoming the solution for people who have a problem that you can fix? When you do that, and people, when they do those searches or they ask around or whatever, and your name comes up, you're not just a solution, you become the savior, you become the go-to. That's a key way to stand out. Again, in my book, which is built on credibility, expertise, real stuff, not marketing and funnels and stuff like that, right?
But okay, does that mean you have to be the expert that writes? We're not all sort of PhDs. I'm not necessarily the expert that's written the book on this or that, but I do want to be acknowledged and be the go-to person. So how do I put myself out there?
So, you actually say something really important there, and it's a problem that so many clever people have. It's really ironic, actually. I believe the more, brainy you are, the bigger the problem is, which is, I can't say anything because I don't have a PhD, to your point. I haven't written a book. Who am I to, what? If you have the lived reality expertise, that's actually much more valuable than any book or any PhD, because it's all about the how do I do it? How does somebody do the thing that you know how to do? That's key. So when I say expert, it is actually built on reality. What is your reality? What is your lived reality where you have results, you have done the thing that you want to be known for? That's why credibility comes in. So really it's the big C. Somebody asked for the 3 C's again. The 3 C's are credible, comfortable, consistent. If you're not credible, go and get credible. Really important. Take ownership of that. You don't need a PhD. You don't need any of these things. In fact, I believe, we're in an era where in our day, in our time, it's like, I need permission from the broadcaster to do this. It was a totally different world, right? Now you can be your own broadcasting agency if you want that. You put your content out. Does it mean that you're going to suddenly get lots of followers? No. It means that you are daring to put your credibility and stuff and information and what you know to be true out there. And if you do it in a specific, clever way, for example, borrow while you build. So an example would be very practical. Find 10, 100, or anything in between podcasts globally, right? We live in this world where, look at us, we're all over the world, right? That is the right podcast for you. Why? How is it the right podcast for you? It's the right podcast for you when the audience of that podcast is, for example, you're a business person or entrepreneur, they are your client, the type of person who can become your client. You put yourself up to be a guest on that podcast. What are you doing? You're building your credibility. You're building your digital footprint because, oh, look, your name is up. Like when somebody does a search, you are practicing how you are going to share your knowledge and the words that you use and the examples and all these things that make you feel better and that add to your comfort. You see, so it's all linked. Personally, that's the route I advocate. Do it that way and you'll be amazed at at least two things. One, you build up your language of how you share your credibility and expertise much faster. You find out what resonates with people if there's a Q&A like we're doing right now, because people will ask what they are interested in, not what you think is the important thing, really important. And you get to be in the spotlight in that way. You don't need to stand on the stage if you don't want to. Yeah.
So thank you, Nima. That's all. And as you say, I think it's all, everything is interconnected, everything is linked. We do have also a question from Nada Kamal, who's saying, I'm encouraged to go to alumni nights and social network events to increase my social network and widen my bubble. However, I find these events very awkward and a waste of time because of the small talk. And even when I engage with small talk, it dies very quickly. And most times people don't carry the conversation very far. And is there any advice on that? And I want to say, I mean, it's true, a lot of people, want to put themselves out there, but how do you, how can you also, you kind of need to zero in. I mean, our time is limited. How do you zero in on, where the most effective spaces will be? Again, physical spaces or online spaces that you will put yourself out there to be known as the go-to person or the expert.
I'm laughing because I might step out a shot in a minute to get something to show you. Okay, first of all, I feel you. Who was it? Is it Nada you said?
Yes.
Yes, I feel you. I am not a small talk person, like I don't do that. I'm rubbish. So that aside, again, go back to the beginning. What do you want to build for yourself? Make sure you build it in a way that you don't hate or it doesn't kill you. What do I mean? I'm assuming that you are an expert in something. I don't know what that thing is. I'm assuming that you're going to the networking thing because you want clients. I'm guessing, right? So if that is true, then ask yourself, if the purpose of this is to earn more, to sell more, to create more business, then where is my ideal client? Personally, I would get more value out of being really specific about where I spend my time, get on a podcast, start a Q&A. Literally, if you just got on LinkedIn, for example, and I did a LinkedIn live, hit live and say, these are the top 5 things that people ask me, and I want to share the answer with you so that you know the answer. And if you have a problem like this, hey, get in touch. For example, that is a more valuable hour of your life than going to a networking event, which is never an hour because you've got to get dressed, get in the car, go there, park, so it's a lot more time. What's the one thing we don't get back? The one thing we don't get back is time.
Time, definitely.
Right, that's it. And we are so default mode, like, oh, I'll go to a networking event. Why? Now, if you need the moral support of other people who are in that network, absolutely, that's brilliant. That's something you are deliberate about. Be deliberate. So always ask yourself, why am I doing this? 2, what purpose does it serve? If it doesn't serve the purpose that you're after, or if there's a better way to spend that time, do the other thing, really. And the reason I'm laughing is because I did a big experiment, right, a few months ago, and I went to my first ever networking event. And I knew no one there, nobody. I thought, oh, yeah, no. So what did I do? I printed out my QR code to my site, and actually it was to a quiz that I have on my as part of my stuff. And I wore it. It was on my back. And that was my, like, people just came up and they, that was my introduction to them. It worked a treat. So what I'm saying is, if you are going to go, ask yourself, what's the purpose of going? How can you get the right people to link with you? The QR code meant that the right people who are interested in what I did, of course, I had a thing saying, you know, communication, blah. They are the ones who linked in with me. So don't just go with a deliberate purpose and make
it count. Make it count. So
while
there's
you're talking, I'm going to actually grab it and show you.
Okay, well, yeah, you're hearing, right? There's a really interesting question from Doha Sumaka, and she says she truly appreciates this book talk and the launch, and congratulations, Nima, on its release. Now, Doha says, having worked in digital media for the past 12 years, I found it increasingly challenging to build my professional name without relying heavily on social media. How does the Brilliant Communicator address the tension between the pressure to establish a personal or business brand on social media and the need to communicate expertise in an authentic and credible way? And I like that question because it's actually something that I've been, wondering myself. It's something, we, again, goes back to sort of maybe our education or upbringing or training or whatever. You always wonder, are we manipulating people? How can we be authentic? Are we trying to sort of, we have to stay true to ourselves. We have to sort of, do something that is aligned with our vision, with what we truly believe in. And at the same time, as you say, we have to be able to sell that in some way. So, how would you go about that? I love the fact that she's asking about the authenticity and the credibility.
I'm going to say something. Don't throw things at me. I'm going to say it. It is, I don't like the word authentic.
Why?
Because it is overused. It has become a sometimes meaningless go-to word where people don't define what it means to them. So authentic, what does it actually mean? What it means to me, and it means different things to different people. So Doha, for example, please chat, let us know what you mean by it. But a lot of people take it to equal vulnerability, extreme vulnerability, for example, right? I'm authentic, I'm going to show off. I don't agree with that. Why? If it comes from a place of, I believe I need to do this in order to get the interest of people. So in other words, if you are like that, and that is how you show up in the world, you're somebody who reveals, discloses, you're that, stay you, but if you're somebody who is more measured, actually my private life is my private life, or what I think about this is what I think about this, and I just want to talk about work, for example, then do that. Maybe though, how your idea of authentic though, what you mean by it is that you want to not jump on the bandwagon and trends and share what you really think, i.e. your opinion, your insight around your expertise. Maybe that's what you mean by being your authentic self. Now that I love it, because that's what we need. I'll give you an example. If I was going to choose somebody for the program that I did, say for BBC World, who would I go to? Would I go to somebody who regurgitated what other people were saying? Or would I go to somebody who had an opinion about the thing that's happening in the world, who had insight that they were going to share? I would go to the person who has the opinion and insight. I always say to people who I train, don't give me Google. Don't give me Google. Not interesting at all. If you've got time later on and you want to buffer it up with certain information, okay, go there. But don't give me Google. It's not the thing to start with, and it's not the thing to put out if you want to be this version of authentic and stand out from the crowd. To your point, how do we stand out? We stand out by leaning into what makes us different. That's how we stand out. We stand out by daring to ruffle feathers and say the things that other people won't say about your expertise area, whatever that thing is, as long as it's based on your, guess what, credibility, expertise, and experience.
Yeah, so there has to be, but again, there has to be this alignment between what you think and what you do and what you present and who you are. I mean, you can't sort of say something, behave a certain way, and then present something else. I mean, that you lose credibility, right? I mean, unless you can get away with it, I don't know. Some people do.
It's just, for example, if you were to look at LinkedIn these days, there's this huge push towards just these, they're just regurgitated sound bites, and everybody's saying the same thing. It's all about, be vulnerable, be authentic. And if you're not authentic, what's that mean? Does that mean that we're not showing up as our real self? Like for me, it's about defining it. And for me, authenticity comes from being brave and scared at the same time, being brave enough to say what you see as the truth. And it could be literally, this pen is rubbish. This is the truth because, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be your very specific area of expertise. Yeah. By the way, just sharing, this is being authentic, right? I'm being me. There's one me, and this is the way I do stuff. There you go. This was the actual QR code. And it says, the Brilliant Communicator, are you? And I had my QR code there, and I wore it as a necklace, right? And on the back of me. So that's me being me. What is it that makes you, Doha? That's the question. What is it makes you, you?
Great. So we've got so many interesting questions. Dina is asking, do you have any advice for handling effective communication while avoiding or managing burnout? And I think it comes to also what you were saying about being selective. Do I have to go to this networking event? Do I have to do all these things? How do I really pinpoint, going back to the idea that, time is really our most valuable resource that is limited. And I want to avoid managing burnout. How do I really strategize in a way? I think that's why they say, strategic communication. How do I really focus on what is important that will be the most effective and powerful way of putting my name or my idea or whatever it is I want to put out there?
So the first question I would ask is, what is the burnout? So what is that? Does that mean that you just feel you're overwhelmed? Does that mean that you feel that you're not sleeping well, because you're taking on too much? Or does that mean that people expect you to deliver on things that are just not realistic? It's not. So I don't know what. In my world, I always get people to define things. We can use words, the same word, but it means very different things to different people. Plus, it relates to a specific thing when it's being used, like this, overwhelm and burnout, or burnout rather. Guess what? I'm going to sound like a broken record. What is your version of success? Our version of success changes with the phases of life. At one point, it is to get the job. At another point, it is to be interviewed on a podcast. Another point, it is to get the funding to start your business. Or it could be to take time away from working full time because somebody in your life needs you. So whatever your success is, define that. And then look through everything that you're doing through the lens of, does this take me towards my definition of success in this phase? Or does this take me away from it? So that's a really important thing. The easiest way to do this, in my book, is define what you do not want. So instead of going, I want all these things, which becomes a very long list, usually, I want this and I want to be able to do that and I want to get that success and write the book or whatever. Take a step back. What do you not want for yourself, for your life, for your loved ones? Start with that, and then do that. Look through the lens of, does this serve me, or is this going to lead to something I do not want? But just with regard to this idea of, I feel that there's too much coming at this person. It's about practicing. It's about knowing who is the key stakeholder that has the power to change this for you. So is it HR? I don't know your situation. Is it your partner in life? Is it a colleague at work? Is it, what is that? Who's got the power to shift that equation for you? And then it is about being brave enough to go and have a very simple, clear, not comfortable conversation with them, where you again start with something that is important to them. For example, it could be, it could be maybe you're overwhelmed because they want to hit a target, or I don't know. Again, I'm speaking, off the top of my head. What's important to them? How does what you're doing help or not help? So in other words, if you burn out and you're going to hit a wall and you have to resign because you can't deal with this, how does that affect what they want? Instead of you hitting that wall, suggest a solution. Do not go and have a conversation with somebody without figuring out what's important to them about the thing that you need for you, and suggesting a solution that you know actually works. And it could be, I've already spoken to this other person who can take this off of me, for example. I'm being very simplistic because I don't know the detail.
That was definitely advice that I was given early on. It was always bring a solution when you bring a question or a problem. So we have two really interesting questions coming up. So one of them is, how do you see the difference between women and men in communication? And that's something interesting because it's something that you have worked on a lot. And another one that is also something you and I probably have thought about in our previous lives. So the previous question was from Zain Ranma about difference between women and men. And Mahmoud Al-Najad is asking, in news broadcasting, how can we measure if our communication is truly impactful, leading to audience understanding and ideally positive behavior change? And I think probably when we live in the Middle East, that's one of the questions that we ask ourselves a lot. So yeah.
I mean, I'll start with that last one, a brief answer. It doesn't work, very simply. So if we're looking at broadcasting and news, they don't, their agenda isn't to change behavior. That's not their agenda. They have, whether the agenda is to inform, whether the agenda is to hook an audience, whatever that thing is, they have their own agenda. And it's certainly not about behavior change, unfortunately, because whether it's about the politics of the region or about climate change or whatever that thing is, that's a different thing. Behavior change is a very different thing.
I suppose that's more advocacy. Sorry to cut you off. That would be more advocacy journalism or advocacy media. Sorry to cut you off.
No, not at all. Oh, I see. Okay, so okay, fine. So I'm going to give you an example. This actually happened today. Somebody who is an expert in the environment and so on, he asked me a question, which is, well, it was along the lines of, how do we, I'm trying to remember the exact words, because it was like, how do we make them understand? Something like that, yeah? You cannot make somebody like that. You're like, listen to me. It's that thing of, you need to know, you need to understand. That doesn't work ever with anyone. If you think, and again, to your point, you said, is this manipulation earlier? I think the word influence is my go-to word. I say we want to learn how to communicate with influence. Influence is not a dirty word. It's what makes things happen. So you want to have the influence over somebody to clean up after themselves, for example, or the influence over somebody to give you that promotion, or to buy a product, or to change the way they think about something and their behavior as a result. If we go back to earlier on, what's that definition of communication? It is transmitting information, it being received by somebody, but received in a way that they get it. They go, oh, I get that. And then they change something as a result. It could be an idea, a behavior, a purchase pattern, something.
Well, that's the thing. If you're invited as an expert, and as you know on TV, you're given sometimes 3 minutes to make your point, and the anchor says, or the interviewer says, well, we're going to leave it at that. You have 3 minutes to. How do you make sure that? How can you measure that what you've said, might actually lead some people to change their perspective? If you're trying to convince them, as you said, be it something political or something about climate change or something about refugees and their plight,
So I've taken a big step away from all of the infinite possibilities of what we could be communicating and what we could want as a result. I took a step back and I went to the core of, what does it mean to communicate? And what are the principles and the foundation building blocks that apply regardless of who the person is and what the situation is? And I thankfully, I've got my book right in front of me. This is something I think you can see. Can you see that? This is a triangle, and it just says, inform, educate, interest. What's that about? Inform is information. You can bombard people with information. educate. You can bombard them with educating them, absolutely. But people aren't actually listening in those two tiers, inform and educate. They will listen if they're already converted to what it is that you do. But your mission is to reach out and connect with people who aren't converted, right? And the only thing that does that is interesting them. So how do you interest somebody? You interest them by, same thing. What is it that I have? The 4 Ps. The 4 Ps are problem, pain, priority, perspective. What's the problem that they have? What's their pain point? What's the pleasure state, i.e. the pain-free state that they can be in? And what is their perspective? So if we're talking about things like the environment, instead of all the stats and like overwhelming people, it's literally, you know, do you care about your children? Do you care about your body? You know, whatever it is that interests that person, do you, whatever interests that person, start with that. Same thing with politics, same thing with stuff like that. Unfortunately, am I saying this is right and fair? No, it isn't. It's rubbish, actually, but it's very human. So the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, do you want to just preach to the choir and have these repetitive conversations with people who already agree at some level? Or do you actually want to reach out to people who don't know the stuff that you know? If that's the case, you must interest them. The only way you can interest them is by starting with something that's relevant to them. If you can interest them, how many times have you watched somebody on TV or on a podcast, listened to them, or read a soundbite, and you think, oh, that's a good point, I'm going to go and check that person out. I've done this many times. You go and you Google that person, right? You go, oh, that was a good point, or that was interesting. If you interest people, they inform themselves. And if you've got content out there that can inform them as well, then they are your disciples in the making. They are people who will look to you for more guidance. So really, again, yeah.
I'd just like to bounce on that. And Zain, I haven't forgotten your question about the difference between women and men in communication. But really quickly, Nima, in 2 words, one thing that struck me in your book is you say you don't like the idea of storytelling. You say forget storytelling. Again, it's something that we're not going to agree on, because I think storytelling is the most powerful way of bringing someone to your perspective, or rather, maybe I put it in the way you were saying, you want somebody to listen. And so the way to get them to listen is to tell a story. Isn't that an entry point?
Yes, is the answer. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Yes.
But you know, this is part of the problem, meaning it's really challenging to find the right story to tell. It's really challenging to be a brilliant storyteller. And the problem is that when people are in meetings, pitching for investment or for a client or whatever that thing is,
they don't have time.
Minutes. There is no time, number one, absolutely, you're right. And so from my perspective, I have relieved people from the potential trauma of like, I don't know what story and how do I do this, by saying the following. When you look at, again, the 4 Ps, and you choose the words that resonate with the person that you want that yes from, and you start with something that interests them, then you are by default telling a form of story, because a story is a conduit. The problem is that we've started using this word story, and it has become like, oh, I've got to have a beginning and a hero and an arc, and then and there's success, and whoa, actually like a Hollywood thing, but on miniature. That's not the only form of story, and that is a disabling way for people to approach the interaction where they need a yes from somebody that is time limited, or that the person they are, like, can you imagine going and speaking to the CEO of some big mega organization, or somebody who's, like a lot going on, and saying, give me this time, and you're going off on a story. It's like, actually, I just want to know the data, and I just want to know, is it a yes or a no? So again, what is that?
That's a very good point.
So stories are so important. You're so right. I mean, both of us, our careers are built on it, right?
Exactly, but there's a time and place, I suppose, for that.
But it's also how you define it, how you define a story, yeah?
True, true. So very quickly, because I think we're going to run out of time very soon, the difference between men and women communicating, and then I have a really nice question from somebody who's actually met you. But first, men and women, because I don't want you to be distracted, and then we'll talk about the other question.
So when it comes to gender, I'm hesitating here because the big thing is this: the things that the genders have to deal with are different. And I'm looking at big data. Example, the most likely gender to take time out to care for somebody in their life is the female. The most likely gender to expect their partner to resign or take a smaller role or to follow them if they are relocated is the male. Do you see? So I'm looking at the arc of big data. There are exceptions and there are successes, and I'm very happy for them, but they do not represent the majority. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because communication is not divorced from social settings and conditioning and all the rest of it. So it is partly that the issues that the genders deal with are different. So issues could be at work. The pipeline from entry level to middle management is full of women, more women, but middle management upwards, very few single digits, if any, women, right? What does that mean? It means that the issues that they have to deal with are very different. Why am I saying this? Because when a person, doesn't matter what their gender is, but they go and they see a decision maker and they say words that the decision maker like, what doesn't resonate. I don't have this problem. I don't understand why this is a problem for you. Do you see? It's back to the same thing of what is it that will get the attention of the person you need a yes from? How does what you want or need help them?
Yeah.
Right? That's the way to do it. The difference, to be blunt, between the genders is that the women are overwhelmed more so than their male counterparts, because they are working 2 full-time jobs at least, at the home, in work, or whatever. So this is I've got a lot to say about this, but what I'm trying to say is that in the context of communication and what we're talking about today, it's the same principle. I wrote the book because I want people to have a practical system and guide. Oh, I have an event, I have a talk, I have a pitch, a meeting, or I have a request. It doesn't matter what the situation is or who the stakeholder is. How can I approach this? That's what I've done. I've whittled it down to basic building blocks that apply across the board. But also specifically, I've done this because I want to encourage more people to do what I call take ownership of their credibility and become the CEO of their credible self. You are an expert in something. Don't stay the world's best kept secret. I don't mean broadcast itself to the universe. I mean the right people for you should know about you, because it means that if your company goes bankrupt, if there's a war on, if you need to earn, if you're known by the right people, you have a much better chance of being able to earn and have choice and dignity in your life. It's a very linear equation. And personally, yeah, I'm not interested in monopolies, not interested in big corps that want profit over people. People take ownership of your credibility and how you are known for it, and create that choice and option in your life.
So that might be, I don't know how much more time we have, but that might be a good entry into the next question from Dr. May Asaf, who says, who's thanking us both. And she says she remembers meeting you, Nima, on the Live It Up Uganda trip, and you were even a brilliant communicator back then. Unsurprising. And she says, despite having a PhD, I often still struggle with imposter syndrome. I do have the lived reality experience, as you mentioned. So how do I determine which of the 3 C's I need to focus on?
So the question is, which of the 3 C's are you most uncomfortable with? So you say that you are credible. So that first C, you've nailed it. Moving on. The second C is comfortable. What is it that you're not comfortable with? Is it that you're not comfortable doing what we're doing right now, having a live interaction where you don't know what's going to be said to you, for example? What is that source of discomfort? Is it because, I'll tell you something, everybody I've ever trained, interviewed, worked with, there is actually one core discomfort, fear. And it's the fear of looking like a fool. of coming across like a fool. That is the core discomfort that everybody has. And in fact, there was a minister who was going to be doing a tour, roundtables, on stage, speaking, media interviews, etc. And he was being trained, and he told me that this was his biggest fear. His biggest fear is looking like a fool. And that changed everything for me in the terms of like, oh my goodness, of course, this is what's at the core of everybody's fear. People say, oh, I don't know what to do on stage, or oh, I don't like people looking at me, and I start, what the fear comes from that point. So the question to ask yourself, May, is what is at the root of you being concerned about looking like a fool? What is that? Is it that you think, oh, I'm going to forget what I wanted to say? Is it that you feel that you would have the opportunity but not say that, you know, you'd speak a lot but not actually get what you want across? You know, what is that? And address that. Does that make sense? So you're credible, you get comfortable by doing the uncomfortable thing. I would always advocate being in a community that can support you for this. And you need to be consistent. Consistent means if somebody asks you to share your expertise on stage, in a panel, in a something, you don't say no. You don't say no. You buy the book and you read it really quickly.
Well, moving to the next question, I think that the question of the imposter syndrome, by the way, is something that I'm sure many of us also, you know, had in mind. So thank you for that. May, I think you asked it for a lot of people. Jude has a question. In an era shaped by digital platforms and cross-cultural interactions, how can leaders and communicators effectively adapt their strategies to connect with diverse audiences, ensuring that their communication fosters trust, collaboration, long-term impact? So, you know, there's a lot of, there are questions like that that have come back, you know, from different people. I think what I want to know, you know, maybe more of that is, it is a bit complicated in this, you know, in this media, in this social media era, to sort of look at all that's around. And, you know, you're addressing different audiences. I think it used to be easier when you know that you're addressing one specific audience, but sometimes you're addressing very different audiences on very different platforms with very different needs. So yes, it's about, you know, we used to be told as journalists, do your homework, but there's also, you know, a lot of that needs to be done. There's a lot of other things that need to be taken into consideration.
So my approach is, again, very simple, because I'm a simple person. And it is the idea of, imagine a funnel, right? It's an upside down triangle. At the top, you've got many people. And then at the bottom, you've got very few, obviously, right? And your best client, or the person that is interesting to you for whatever reason, it could be a policymaker, whatever, is the smaller numbers, right? The top of the funnel is where you are broadcasting more general information about what you do. The bottom of the funnel is where you are broadcasting. When I say broadcasting, I mean sharing. Yeah, it could be writing, drawing, speaking, doesn't matter what it is. The more specific information about your expertise and so on, so it's more detailed. One, we had a phrase that we used when I did the BBC program, which was new readers start here. And it's something that every brilliant communicator does, which is they leave no one behind. So they don't use jargon, technical terms, big things that lose people. That's one. If you want to address people, it's not about being clever, it's about being clear. It's not about using jargon, it's about being really simplistic in your language. It doesn't mean that the idea is simple, right? But this specific thing is really define what you want to build for yourself. You don't need to speak to everyone. Why are you speaking to everyone? It depends. So one, who do you need to speak to? Why? Is it top of funnel? We need a lot of people to know these things for whatever reason. Then you create stuff that is more general. If it's the narrow bit at the end, this is your ideal client or the policymaker, then you create information that is specific to the action you want them to take. That is, I'm going to repeat that again. Specific to the action you want them to take. That is what you communicate. So yes, you're right, Jude. There's so much choice and options. To be frank, personally, I'm not interested in all that. It's about defining what serves your purpose and creating the right type of information content for that. And it's a brave person who says, we're not doing that, and sticking to it.
Okay, so I guess we don't have time, if I'm not mistaken, but it does sort of answer that other question from Mahmoud al-Najjar. When should we abandon a communication strategy that is not working? So I suppose that kind of answers it already. I'm going to let you wrap up, Jude. I wanted to thank Nima Abu Wardeh again for your brilliant communication of your Brilliant Communicators book. Thank you again to the Columbia Center in Amman, Hania, Salah, and all the team. Thank you, Jude. I'm going to let you take it from there. And thank you so much who've been around here and who've been listening and watching this webinar. We're looking forward to hopefully having more events of this type at JMI and QMUC.
Thank you so much, Princess Rym, and thank you so much, Nima. This was such an incredible talk. And I know at JMI, we learned so much. And I would like to also thank CGC Amman for hosting this webinar. I know I'm definitely going to be putting some of those tips to use. I learned a lot. I just wanted to also thank our audience and share that a virtual recording of this webinar will be available on CGC Amman's website. And wanted to let people know that we did share the link to the book, so feel free to buy it and learn a lot more on how to be a brilliant communicator. And I hope everyone has a lovely evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you again.